Louisiana versus all y'all. Jared Roser continuing the look around the state area by area as we prepare for this 2024 high school football season. Looking at the North Shore area today with St. Tammany Farmer sports editor Joseph Halm, a guy who's worn, I guess, many hats with different publications and whatnot around the area, going back to our days working together at NOLA.com, and a guy that knows North Shore area high school sports as well as anybody right now. And so, Joe, I appreciate you taking some time to chop it up a little bit and share a little bit of your perspective on what to expect from these teams around that 985.
Yeah, always happy to chat with you. It's been so long. When we first met, I had a fully black beard, and now it's salt and pepper. That's how long we've been doing this, man.
Yeah, man. It's always a pleasure to chat with you as well. And we get to start with the 5A group that is that area of the state. Always so much fun, so much competitive parity year in and year out, and teams that love to upset one another, play spoiler at times and whatnot. And that fun district is now split into two fun 5A districts this year. And that's kind of a big storyline for you on the North Shore area. And so I guess looking first at that 6-5A group, the western half of your coverage area, where you have Covington with Hammond and Mandeville, Ponchatoula, and St. Paul's. And so a lot of teams that you are super familiar with in terms of actual coverage responsibilities, and some teams from a little bit further west that by the nature of the district you've gotten pretty familiar with as well. When you look at that group and the expectations for this year, what are you watching? What are you seeing from those five teams?
Yeah, I think 6-5A, the 6-5A that we have now, the Western District, is really tough. I mean, Mandeville's coming back from the semifinal runs. St. Paul's is always good. I'm going to believe in Covington this year. They had a really rough injury last year. And then you put in those two Tangi schools, even with the new coach at Ponchatoula, who's new but been with the system. And Hammond really gets, I don't want to say screwed, but really draws a short stick in this district, because they are a much better team than they were 3 years ago when I started doing this full time. And they are just in a murderer's row district. I mean, when I look at the 6-5A district, I am so high on St. Paul's and Mandeville that I have to almost check myself all the time, because we all know what Nate Shepard did last year in the playoffs. He was incredible. That the performance at Airline was insane, and he's only gotten better, and that team's only gotten deeper. And Ben Hendricks is back at quarterback, who started late last year but is only a junior. He's going to be really good. So that whole team is just excited, and they're not going to sneak up on anybody. But literally, their longest road trip is to Ponchatoula this season. So they're not going anywhere. So they're going to have a chance to really grow all season long, which is insane to me. And then St. Paul's is so good all the time. They do such an amazing job there. Kenny Sears, and that team is always tough. And then they bring back a quarterback who's never lost in district, and they bring back a pair of running backs who are really good. And they seem like they are, what was that? 2 years ago, they made the semifinals with a great defense. And I think their defense will be good, but I think this offense can actually be very solid to good. And if you pair those two things together, St. Paul's is a team no one wants to face. And then Covington has a bunch of talent back. They've got a new quarterback, but he played safety last year, so he's familiar with things. Kalen Williams is back off of an ankle injury. He's a really great back. They've got all their offensive line back, so I think Greg Salter, after missing the playoffs last year, should have no problem, A, making it, and B, probably being pretty good. And then you put in those two Tangi teams, which are, Ponchatoula is going to have to replace Bishop Davis. That's a big ask, but you have to replace great athletes every year. They have a great program there. And like I said, Hammond has more athletes than I know what to do with. They're just in a district that's full of teams that also are very talented and very well coached. So, week in and week out, it's tough. But the thing that I like about splitting up the districts, and I've talked to so many coaches about this, is that it makes scheduling for PowerPoints easier. And that's not, whether it's good or bad, it's going to help your team in the playoffs, right? So now you go from a 7-game slate to a 4-game slate, and you can do what you want out of district. St. Paul's is playing U High, which is going to be a great game in week 5. They're keeping some of the traditional rivalries. Mandeville still playing Fountain Blue. The battle for the Little Brown Jug, which is actually in district, now moves to week 10, which I think benefits both of those teams, because I can't think of a better tune-up for the playoffs than Covington St. Paul's in Week 10. Like I just can't think of a better atmosphere to get both of those teams ready to play in the playoffs. So I think when I look at that district, Mandeville and St. Paul's really. I got to check myself, but those are two teams that I expect to be covering a game Thanksgiving week. Like I really expect to be out there, still covering these teams because I think they're that talented on all levels.
I know just from doing some of these other little previews around the state that there's not going to be a lot of people excited to hear that Mandeville is potentially deeper and going to have a chance to grow throughout this season, including recording the Shreveport area and talking about Airline and how great their season was going until they met Mr. Nate Shepard.
That kid is just incredible. I mean, you and I both done this for a long time. We've seen a lot of great athletes, but he comes from such a great family. He's so smart. He's going to be graduating in December. He should be making his commitment probably this week, he told me. And when you look at his schools, it's like Cal and Tulane and Duke. It's all a bunch of smart kid schools, right? So he's graduating early. He's going to quote unquote smart kid school, and he's a great athlete, and he's a smart kid, and his brother's going to do great things at Colorado this season too. I really think he did so much good work at Vanderbilt, so he just amazes me every time. And he's one of those kids, and you and I have done this before, but like polished, right? Like you go talk to some kids and they're like, I don't know what to say, and this kid's like, he's got two quotes in the bag, and then he comes up with something smart at the end, and he's just so polished in the media training, and then you look at him on the field and he's so polished there, and you just think, I wish I was this smart when I was 18 years old, all around.
Yeah, you mentioned polished, smart, all these things, and he can seem, I guess, kind of quiet or mild mannered at times because he's got it all together in a lot of ways, and he is as feisty and fierce of a competitor as there is in the state, who I think gets in this great 2025 running back class in Louisiana. He gets overlooked a little bit, and he wears that chip on his shoulder in a big way, and really enjoyed opening some eyes and putting people on notice a little bit through that great run last year. And so now getting ready for senior year, I'm expecting more of the same. It's going to be fun watching him and the Skippers. And as you mentioned, that whole 6-5A district with a lot of really capable teams. And we alluded the district splits, and so the east half where you get the Slidell teams, including Salmon coming up from 4A, and Fontainebleau over there with Salmon, Slidell, North Shore, and Chalmette, a district champion last year with some South Shore teams, makes a move up to join these North Shore guys. When you look at the outlook for 7-5A, what do you see from that group? Imagining some similarities in terms of there's an opportunity for some level of parity, but a couple of teams may be standing out.
Yeah, I mean that's the most wide open district, I think, in 5A, maybe in the whole state. Chalmette won their district last year. They lost a whole bunch of 27 seniors, 20 starters. That's a lot to replace. Salmon, they have so much talent. They have so much speed, but moving up to 5A is a whole different animal. I think I talked to Coach Shooter for a preview, and he said, well, the biggest thing we're working on is depth because we can't play 7 linemen. And he's right. If they're able to find 9, 10 linemen, they'll be really, really, really good. It's just a matter of if they're able to do that. North Shore graduated that huge class. They're coming off of back-to-back playoff wins. So it'll be curious to see how quickly they can sort of replace those leaders that were on that team that were, part of that sort of renaissance they've had over there. Slidell's got a new coach. They've got a bunch of babies on that team. This is probably a year where they're going to end up just growing. I mean, they're going to start 10 sophomores, and it's hard to win at the 5A level starting 10 sophomores. It is what it is. But I think they're in the right track. Coach Page is doing a good job as he motivating those kids and getting them to grow up. And then I think Fontainebleau is a great X factor in this district. Is that Johnny Kavanaugh does a great job. He's a smart coach. They got Brennan Obey, the transfer from Hannon, who had 1,500 yards last year rushing. He's a legit running back. He made that team infinitely better. And you talked about Nate having a chip on his shoulder. Obey's got a huge chip on his shoulder. He is ready to prove that he can do what he did last year at the 5A level. And there's no better coach in the state to use his talents than Kavanaugh. I mean, he's going to be tremendous in that offense. They've got their quarterback back. They've got a tremendous wide receiver in Sebastian Miller. They just lack for depth. If they have any sort of injuries, it's going to be tough on Fontainebleau if they come at the wrong position. So I think that's sort of the story of the district, right? I feel like every team in there, I can make an argument, hey, this is how they win. And then I also, in the same breath, say, well, this is how they, struggle, whether they can't replace their starters, whether they have injuries at key positions, whether they, just have to grow up and they don't quite grow up as quickly as you think they would. North Shore is an example of that. They play Curtis in week 2. And I asked Bobby Sanders, you should probably fire this coach who did all this scheduling. He goes, yeah, I should probably fire that guy and shave his beard too. I mean, I don't know what he's doing with a big beard, right? I mean, it's just one of those things where it's just every team has a question mark. And it's going to be really interesting to watch because all of these teams are well coached and they all have a hole somewhere that sticks out on paper. But they all have a great strength somewhere that you say if they take advantage of that, they're going to run away with things. So it's just a matter of how that district shakes out. I'll give you the little sneak peek in my preview tab. I picked Chalmette to win the district, but I could easily see Salmon winning this district. I could easily see North Shore if they survive the early part of their schedule without getting too down on themselves, or maybe sneaking a win out, or being competitive. All of a sudden, they get in the district, they go on a run, and then Fountain Blue, if they stay healthy, that offense can put up points. So it's just those 4 teams. Put them in a box, shake them out. You can make an argument for any of them winning the district.
Yeah, particularly we talk about high school football, and as much as everyone wants to look at predictions and this team will do this team will do that, at the end of the day, we have to always remember we're talking about high school student athletes. And so what you get on a given Friday, who's going through a breakup or got a bad grade on Wednesday or whatever, it can be a little bit of a crapshoot. And this will be a district that'll be fun to see how it all kind of comes together for each of these teams growing through the course of this season. Looking at that 7-4A district, you mentioned Hannon a second ago, losing a key player. Archbishop Hannon's in there with Franklinton, Lakeshore, Laranger, and Pearl River. I mean, you got some teams now in a second year under a new coach, or in Laranger's case, they've got a 4th-year starter at quarterback that's been so great for that program. And the Lakeshore program that's been so strong for so long, probably excited to see Salmon head on up to 5A after last year. But what do you look for this year in 7-4A? What's kind of your expectation, or some a favorite you're looking at, or some key storylines to watch?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for 7-4A is, that's in a district where I talked with Brett Indes at Lakeshore, and they're going to play some more 2-way players. Does that mean they're going to go 100% both ways? No. But they're going to have people at their skill positions who are going to play running back and DB, or, linebacker and running back, that sort of thing. They're trying to maximize their speed. And part of the reason for that is that a lot of these teams, I think all of them do now, because since Salmon's gone, play in the Division II playoffs, which is 4A and 3A. So for the regular season, you're playing a 4A schedule, but in the playoffs, you're going to play this mix of sort of the lower half of the 4A enrollment wise. So that's a lot more 2-way players. And I think a lot of these programs that sort of embrace that district lost a team with Salmon moving up, so it's 5. So we go back to the scheduling thing. You can do a lot more scheduling wise, PowerPoint wise, that sort of thing. So I think a lot of these teams are going to embrace putting their best athletes on the field in the, whether it be 60% of the time on defense and 100% on offense, or vice versa. But I think that you're going to see a lot of these great athletes on these teams play 60-70% of the snaps in a game. And I think that'll sort of be the telling point for this district. I still think Franklinton probably wins it. Salta Formaggio's done a good job there. He's in his 2nd year. There's a lot of talent there. This district's also pretty wide open, I think. I would probably put them first. They've got Connor McGee coming back. He's a great talent. I would probably put Lakeshore and Pearl in the same boat, in that Pearl River has Tashad Badon, who's a pretty special back if he can stay healthy and really embrace that bell cow role, because he's never done that before. So this will be his first season, like true bell cow. He's a pretty special talent. So they have the ability. They've got a new quarterback, Braden Hutchinson, who's very good. I think they'll be able to be a little more multiple on offense this year, which will be key for them. But again, it goes back to staying healthy because a lot of these teams are going to have players on both sides of the ball, and they're going to have 22 to 22. They can stack up against anybody. But if they lose key members of that 22, how much do they fall off? How much of those other players step up? I think Lakeshore is a sneaky team in that he Indes hired his nephew Cody Bodie, who was at Kaplan. They got Bo Brunner, who was at Shaw, the defensive backs coach is now at Lakeshore. I think he really trusts what he has on defense now, and I think he's going to spend a little more time on offense. He mentioned that when I talked to him. That can be an X factor. It's year 3 for them. I think the coaching in this district is also very good. That could be a big X factor for them. And also, I'll break it here first, but they're going to go to the shotgun wing. So get ready for wing T spread football. I don't know what it looks like. I've seen it in practice. I like it. It's fun. It has elements of both. So that'll be fun to watch. And then LaRondra, you mentioned they've got some talent back. The running back's pretty special. Um, that district, as far as I look at it, is pretty wide open. I give Franklinton the edge, but I think you can make an argument for Franklinton, Pearl, or Lakeshore based on health and sort of each of those teams has a question mark. Lakeshore has some new offensive linemen coming back. How do they fit in? Pearl River, while we like the quarterback, he's still making his first time starting at the varsity level. He should be good, but you're still first time taking live rounds to the varsity level. How did that work out? And health is always. I'll say that over and over again, but health is always the biggest thing. I think, especially on the North Shore, like there's good programs, but I think the skill players are getting more and more fragmented. You don't see those crazy Shaw or crazy like car teams where you have 7, 8, 9, 10 D1 prospects. You see Nate Shepard and a bunch of really good football players around him prospect wise. So if you lose a guy that's your D1 prospect, everything changes a lot on the offense. You can still be good, but you don't have that sort of next level talent. I think that's the case for a lot of these teams in 7-4A.
In 8-3A, that's a district in your general neck of the woods, but a lot of it is more outskirts. And so
Yeah.
you might not have quite the same level of detail, but I know, an A-Meet program out there in Tangi that has been as talented in the 985 in terms of producing some D1 guys through the years as anyone. Bogalusa, Albany, Jules Sumner, Springfield, all in that 8-3A district. As you kind of hear a little bit about expectations, particularly for the A-Meet Warriors and just that district overall, what is kind of the buzz that makes its way your way?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're still the cream of the crop in that district. They've been so good for so long. The expectations there are, I sort of liken them in a lot of ways to St. Paul's in Tammany, where you just think you're always going to have a good team. You're always going to have a solid team. They're always going to be tough no matter what happens. And then they also happen to have ridiculous talent in many years, which makes a big difference. And I think they're still the cream of that crop. And like I said, in 3A, 2A players are important, so health is always a big factor in that district. Bogalusa loses a really big quarterback in Levi. Crutchfield does a good job up there. He'll have some athletes coming back for them. I haven't talked to him yet, but I will shortly. And that'll be the key for all of those teams is can they stay healthy and can they get their skill guys in the right position to make the most impact?
The 9-2A district that you're more involved with, you've got Independence with North Lake Christian right there. A kid that I would love to see at some point, the Cameron Casnave, the youngster, or I guess not quite as young anymore now at North Lake Christian. Pope John Paul II, St. Helena, and St. Thomas Aquinas. What are you looking for, particularly from your true coverage teams there in North Lake and Pope and just, I guess, the 9-2A group overall?
Yeah, North Lake. I think North Lake's the cream of the crop in that district. Pope is a close second. Coach Pike had jokingly told me not to pick him to be first, so I'll pick him to be second. That way, he's got a little something to fight for. He's got a little bullet board material or YouTube material, however you want to say it. I think those two teams are the two best. Pope won the district last year. They return a whole bunch, including their running back Dominic Smith, or I guess their fullback. Actually, they won the ring tee. He's their fullback. He's coming off a 1,400-yard season. They returned most of their offensive line. they're going to be really good. Pope has turned a corner, I think. I went out to photo day and they had like 80, 90 kids. Now this includes the babies too. This includes the eighth graders and the ninth graders, but they had 80 kids, a legit 80 kids out there. And I was shocked. Some of the players, I was like, have you ever seen a Pope day this big? And they go, no, we have not. So that's a big thing for them. I think that shows the excitement they have. And Northlake, I talked about Salmon's skill and speed. Castanet special. Jordan Willis, who is James Willis's son, he's another special kid. They got their quarterback back in LeBlanc. He's going to be really good. They've got a decent amount of linemen back. They've got a decent amount of experience back on defense. Their defense was actually much better than I thought it was last season doing the preview for them. They only gave up something like 30 or not 30, 13 points a game on average, which of course there's some skewed in there because you earlier in the season composed to late, but they were still a much solider unit than I remember. And I think that bodes well for them because they bring a lot back. So, Pope and Northlake was a 1 point game last year. I think it'll be a 1 point game this year, and that'll decide who wins this district. St. Thomas Aquinas is a new coach. That'll be interesting to see how he does. And St. Helena is always the X factor in this district because they have so much talent. They really do. When you see them walk off the bus, it's crazy. And then it's just a matter of how they are able to utilize that talent, and B, like everyone else, stay healthy because they've got a bunch of really good players. And then, after that, those X factor players, you sort of come back to the pack. So if you have them healthy all year, that's the difference between losing a game by a touchdown or winning a game by a touchdown. And that's huge in these districts. And, last year, Pope in this district won 4 of their 5 district games by a touchdown or less, and 2 of them were on field goals in the last minute. And that's how they won a district title. They won in crunch time, and I think that'll be the story again. In that teams that are good in crunch time in this district will be able to make a run. I just think that Northlake and Pope, that matchup will be fun because it's always a good rivalry. But B, the talent level is as high for those 2 teams that it has been in a long time.
The anecdote you shared about the preseason predictions was really enjoyable too, because the amount of times that you put something out in terms of preseason predictions or whatever, and then you immediately hear from the kids and the parents, and you're trying to say, your coach actively wanted me to not pick you to win the district because of this rile up situation that we've got now. And so it's always funny to kind of watch that interplay of the bulletin board opportunities and whatnot.
I always love, because when we're going back doing the tab that'll come out next week, I was looking over last year's stuff, and there were some districts where I was like, man, I'm the smartest guy alive, and there were other districts where I was like, what am I thinking? And it wasn't even like injuries or something. There were some of those where I was like, man, I just got fooled. And that's the crazy thing about the preseason. You and I both know this, is that A, everybody has a chance now. B, everybody is trying to impart that to their kids because you want to have that confidence. You have to play confidently to play the sport. And C, you have no idea what's going to happen health wise, just how things break. And it could be 3 plays. If Pope misses 2 of those field goals, we're talking about a team that was on the road in the first round of the playoffs last year, as opposed to the district champion that was at home. And that's literally 2 plays. So that's literally what the difference is between 5-0 in district and 3-2 in district and in the middle of the pack. And that's huge. And you just can't predict those. And that's what makes football fun. I mean, it's a big overview of everything, but then when you really go back and look at it, it really comes down to 5 plays a game that make a difference in any close game or any competitive game.
And then just, I guess, quickly wrapping it up with 1A for folks watching is very similar for Joe to 3A, where he doesn't have a lot going on there in terms of true St. Tammany teams or true North Shore teams for his coverage area. You've got Kentwood that I think Robin Fambro and I talked a little bit about more in the Baton Rouge preview, because they're with Central Private, Southern Lab, and Thrive Academy. And then also out there on the outskirts, Varnado is in the South Shore district predominantly with in 10-1A with Crescent City, Riverside, St. Martin's, and West St. John out in the river parishes. Joe, I don't know if you have much on Kentwood in particular, hearing a little bit about them the same way as they meet or not, but if so, by all means share, and if not, totally understandable.
Yeah, new coach over for Kentwood. I think he'll do fine. I mean, I haven't gotten out to them too much. I'll make a few phone calls this week, but what I've read and what I've heard from other people is that they'll be fine again. And I think that district again is just sort of status quo for what we've seen in the past, and that's pretty common. I'm sure Robin said similar things. I'll be curious to see about you. Do you think the redistricting? Because I've been so messed up and or so caught up in my 5A district that everyone has a very strong opinion one way or another, and I think it's all sort of even out in the wash in the grand scheme of life on the North Shore because of how that district got sort of divided up and how they kept some traditional rivalries. And you lost a few traditional rivalries, but you kept most everything. But across the coverage area, sort of on the North Shore, did anything really change that you see in terms of rivals or anything like that? Because I don't know that it did other than now I have some 5 team districts and a game that I has been a district game for 20 years is now a non-district game in week 7 instead of week 9.
Yeah, I haven't dug into full schedules team by team. Actually, our another guy that we used to work with at NOLA.com, Sam Spiegelman, was asking me recently if I'd looked at this team's schedule or that team's schedule, and I have looked kind of week by week. Here's the statewide schedule for this week
Hmm.
and the statewide schedule for this week. And so I kind of lose track somewhat of what the actual team by team schedules look like in that way. And so I guess from my perspective, I just noticed as they were redistricting, oh man, they're splitting up that 5A district. I don't love that because of some of those rivalries. But if those key rivalries are still intact in the non-district, then I don't really have much to say about it at that point. To still get a chance to see some of those teams play earlier, just a little bit earlier on than what we've seen in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll give St. Tammany credit. I don't think a lot of people loved it. They kept the Tansy schools on one side. They added Chalmette, which people were so upset about. But all the Slidell's teams are as close to Chalmette as they are to Covington or St. Paul's up in Covington. When you go through traffic and everything, it's almost the same trip. It's just different direction. So it's sort of weird. And I think I'll give the administration credit that they did a good job in presenting an option that was the most, close to what they wanted. And two, they said we're going to try to keep all those rivalries, and they did a pretty good job of that. I'd say they kept 80 to 90% of the rivalries, and the big rivalries, like I said, the Little Brown Jug, St. Paul's, and Covington are still in district, but Mandeville's going to play Fountain Blue in week 10, and that'll be a fun, rivalry game at the end of the season for those two schools that aren't in the same district now, but are so close to each other geographically. So I think I've been impressed, and I'll take it for what it is because I don't know scheduling wise. I think all the teams took advantage PowerPoints wise as much as they could and made the schedule what they wanted it to be. Because had they gone to a 9-team district or a 10-team district, that would have been a nightmare. It would have been a grind and a nightmare, and there's no good option there.
That's what I was about to say. The flip side of that is Roy Lang and I a few hours ago recorded a Shreveport preview where they have a 9-team District 1
Oof.
5A and are completely handcuffed in terms of what you can try and do from a scheduling standpoint. If you have some rivalry in your area that isn't in that district somehow, if you have a rivalry with a 4A or whatever it is, then all of a sudden, I mean, you just don't have any flexibility whatsoever scheduling. And so the ability to maintain some of that these North Shore schools had a chance to do without being handcuffed with an insane district numbers wise. I feel like that's a better fit than maybe I was giving it credit for initially.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's as good as an unpopular situation can be, and I've sort of talked to all the coaches about it, and everyone has a slightly different take on it, and it's all this is what it is for 2 years. We'll see how the numbers break out in 2 years, and we'll go back to the drawing board. But at very least, they kept most of the rivalries, which is good. And hey, man, it's football. At the end of the day, they're still playing football, which is a good thing.
There you go, Joe. Appreciate your time, man.
Always, it's a pleasure, man. Good to see you. We got to do this more often.
Yeah, that's been kind of a recurring theme as I do some of these around the state. Is it'd be awesome if we can figure out ways to kind of connect some of these dots and chat a little bit more frequently, because for a lot of y'all that I'm talking to for this, like, we may run into each other at a game in some sport during the course of the year or state championships or whatnot, but this is the first time that I've had y'all on Louisiana versus all y'all since I've been slowly but surely building this, and it's an absolute pleasure to catch up as the season approaches.
Yeah, man, been good.
Good deal, man. Again, he's Joseph Halm, sports editor for the St. Tammany Farmer. He mentioned that tab that'll be coming out next week, or depending on when this video drops, it may be out or about to be out in the next day or so. So make sure that you check that out for that much more in-depth perspective on some of these teams out in his coverage area. And for Louisiana versus all y'all, Jarrett Roser. Thanks, y'all.